Hello, friends. My name is Ty, and I'm going to read to you. It's time for Chapter 3 of my novel, The Watch. I apologize that I've been so tardy making these videos. I just transferred offices at work, so my plate has been very full, but I promise in the future I will eat faster. Here we go. One thing a cop learns as he goes through his career is that the search for information is all important. The best information, Quinn always found, came from people who talked to everyone they met. No one, but no one, talked to more people than a prostitute. On the first night shift following the meeting with Autumn Donnelly, Quinn waited until it got dark and drove his police cruiser down to the east end of the business district. There, among the hourly hotels, the shithole bars, and the pawn shops, he knew he'd find the person he was looking for. The rain had finally stopped, but the weather had turned bitterly cold. Ice crystals had formed on the streets and the brickwork of the surrounding buildings. The cold had driven even the hardiest of Resolution's denizens indoors, and the streets were deserted, so Quinn's target would be easy to spot. He stopped his car in a dark alley across from a hotel bearing a neon sign that read, "The Travelers Inn." The establishment in question was a squat, miserable-looking building with frayed curtains in the windows and an old-fashioned fire escape sagging on its brackets, facing out over the street. He radioed dispatch and told them he was conducting a follow-up on a previous file and settled in to wait. He did not have to wait long. After a few minutes, a chubby, balding man, with a pinched face like a weasel, scurried down the street and stood in front of the hotel. He looked around nervously, but Quinn's car was well back from the street in the shadows of two buildings and could not be seen. The weaselly man was talking on a cell phone, but snapped it quickly shut and jammed his hands in his pockets. He hunched his shoulders and looked around again, his rapid breaths misting in the cold air. The door to the inn opened and a woman, dressed in a short, ridiculously tight black leather miniskirt, with her platinum hair teased into a giant mound on top of her head, stepped out and sauntered over to the weasel with a plastic smile on her face. The two talked for several moments, while the weasel made several gestures describing the sorts of services he was hoping to procure, and then pulled a wad of folded bills out of his pocket. Quinn grinned as he put his car into gear and flicked on the red and blue roof lights. He pulled up quickly, screeching to a stop in front of the pair. The weasel looked terrified, but the hooker only rolled her eyes and stuck out a plump hip. Quinn got out of the car and pointed at the weasel with one hand while the other rested on the butt of his gun. "You!" he said in a voice of command. "You're under arrest for solicitation. Take your hands out of your pockets." The weasel threw his hands in the air and began shaking and gibbering. "Constable Sullivan," the hooker drawled. "Having a slow night or what? You don't have anything better to do than harass me? Hiya, Lanny," Quinn said as he grabbed the weasel's arm, twisted it behind his back, and slapped a handcuff on it. "You know I'm not harassing you. I'm serving the public interest and protecting you from yourself. What if this guy is a psycho?" He leaned over the weasel's shoulder and looked in his pinched, terrified face. "Are you a psycho?" The man whimpered and did not answer. The hooker rolled her eyes again. Quinn had met Lanny Sorensen, the exasperated girlfriend for hire, on his first few shifts in Resolution. He talked to more than a few prostitutes during his days in Surrey, but generally did not give them a hard time. He had always figured they weren't hurting anyone but themselves when they plied their trade. When he did talk to them, it was only to see if they had anything useful to pass on, or if they had any bad dates, Johns that would rough them up, or did anything out of the ordinary. The only reason he was leaning on Lanny now was because she was generally less than talkative, but knew a great many people and would not talk to Quinn. But knew a great many people that would not talk to Quinn and would probably be able to tell him what he needed to know. "You got a name, psycho?" Quinn asked the weasel. "Phil Brown," Weasel said through a sob. "You in the habit of picking up hookers, Philip?" Quinn asked as he patted the trembling man down and pulled his wallet from his back pocket. Quinn flipped the wallet open to confirm the man's identity and then stuffed it back into the pocket. Lanny dug a battered packet of cigarettes out of her patent leather purse and lit one, huffing impatiently. "Please," the weasel stammered. "I've never done anything like this before. I don't want my wife to find out." "Your wife?" Quinn exclaimed happily. "How would she feel if she had to come and bail your sorry ass out of jail?" "I certainly have to tell her why you were arrested and what sorts of things you wanted Lanny here to do for you. In fact, I'd have to put your name in the paper, on our list of recently arrested Johns. Your mugshot would look great on the front page, don't you think?" The weasel moaned pitifully and his knees sagged. Quinn had to haul on his arm to keep him upright. Quinn glanced at Lanny, and when he heard her clear his throat, she pointed downwards with a hand holding the cigarette and made a disgusted face. Quinn looked down to see that the weasel had pissed his pants and now stood in a steaming puddle of his own urine. "Well," Quinn said contemplatively, as he stepped away from the piss, "I really am supposed to arrest and charge anyone found soliciting the services of a prostitute, but I suppose that I could make an exception, seeing this is your first offense. What do you think, Lanny?" The hooker ignored him and dragged on her cigarette. "Exactly what I was thinking," Quinn said, as though she had agreed with him. He undid Mr. Weasel's handcuffs and spun the shaking man around and grabbed the lapels of his coat. "I'm going to cut you a break here, Philip, but if I ever catch you down here again, I'm going to drag you into your living room and explain to your wife what you were doing." He shook the man sharply, causing his head to jerk and his comb-over to fall against his face. "You got that?" The weasel nodded frantically, tears running down his face. "Good. Now get the fuck out of here. Go home and tell your wife you love her. I guess she hasn't heard it in a while, and it's probably too good for you." Quinn released the man with a small shove. In his haste to get away, the weasel tripped over his own feet and sprawled, face first, onto the sidewalk. He scrambled to his feet and ran into the icy gloom. "And change your pants!" Quinn called after the fleeing figure. He dusted off his hands, and, careful not to slip and step into the half-frozen puddle of urine, turned back to Lanny, who was glaring at him furiously. "What the fuck are you doing here?" she demanded, blowing smoke at him. "I want to talk to you." "You want my time, you pay for it like anybody else. You just cost me $300. Do you know how much that little prick was willing to pay for a blowjob? I'm not fucking talking to you." She puffed on her cigarette some more and looked obstinate. "Well, Lanny," Quinn said, folding his arms and leaning back against the hood of his car, "we can play it that way if you want, and I can hang around with you all night. And tomorrow night. And every night from now until I fucking retire. I'll heat you up so bad no one for 1,000 miles will come anywhere near you." He looked down at his fingernails. "Or you can talk to me for a few minutes and I'll go away like I was never here." Lanny sighed heavily, dropped her cigarette on the ground and stepped on it with a pointy shoe. "All right, for fuck's sakes. What the hell do you want?" "When was the last time you saw Scooby?" She paused and looked away. He could see that it was not a question she had been expecting. She crossed her arms and looked back at Quinn, her eyes suddenly gone red, and sniffed loudly. "I saw him about 2 days before you fucking shot him." Quinn kept his face impassive, but the comment stung. "I didn't want to shoot him, Lanny. I liked him. You didn't leave me any choice." She looked away again and made a show of sucking at her teeth. "Yeah, fuck, whatever. What about Scooby?" Quinn sighed. This was not going to be easy. "When you saw him, did he seem all right to you?" He knew that Lanny and Scooby had been friends, although she would likely never admit it. Quinn had often seen them together, Scooby reciting old poetry and an ode to Lanny's beauty while she dropped her tough chick act for a few minutes and actually laughed. It was likely the only laugh she ever had that wasn't paid for. "The guy was fucking crazy," Lanny said. "Of course he wasn't all right." "You know what I mean." Lanny hitched her purse higher on her shoulder, put her hands on her hips, then crossed her arms. It was clearly making her uncomfortable to talk about Scooby. Quinn did not relish the idea of pressing her, but there were questions he needed answered. "No," she said finally, "he wasn't all right. He kept talking about weird shit." "What kind of weird shit?" "I don't know." She paused. "He kept fucking talking about eyes in the dark or some fucking thing. No poetry, no jokes, just this fucking jabbering. He wouldn't even talk to that stupid doll on his bike, and he was jumping at his own shadow like he was scared. He kept looking behind him like he expected to see the fucking boogeyman." Quinn thought about Lanny's words for a moment. Scooby, in the time Quinn had known him, had always been happy and friendly. Well, at least as happy as a homeless man with schizophrenia could be. The whole thing about the eyes in the dark must have been some vague reference to ancient English literature that nobody but Scooby remembered. What had he been doing lately? Quinn asked. I mean, had he been doing anything different? Was he using anything? "Scooby didn't use drugs," she said, and glared at him balefully. "But about 2 weeks before you killed him, he shows up with $50 and says he wants to buy me dinner. Scooby hardly ever had a dollar in his pocket that wasn't spent on booze, so I asked him where he got it. He started up some shit about a gentleman of leisure needing the services of a bard. I didn't like that answer, so I pushed him on it. I hardly ever understood a fucking word he said, but I think he was doing odd jobs for someone in the South End, maybe running packages or something. I don't know who it was, though. It was after he'd been working for whoever it was that he started talking about eyes in the dark. That's all I fucking know. Where did he get the gun? How the fuck should I know? I've never seen him with it before. I didn't think he even knew how to use a gun. Quinn thought about pushing her some more, but decided against it. There were tears running freely down her face now, and he didn't think she would give him anything else. He reached into the pocket of his pants and pulled out a few folded bills and held them out to her. Here, he said. Take this and go home. There is something going on in this town and you don't want any part of it. You'd be safer off the streets. She snatched the money out of his hand without hesitation and stuffed it into her bra. Quinn turned to get back into his car and Lanny started down the sidewalk. She stopped, suddenly, and turned back. If someone did something to him, something that made him shoot at people, you'll find out, right? You won't let them get away with this shit, will you? Quinn was surprised by the question. It was a brief flash of tenderness from one of the hardest people he had ever met. I'll do what he can, was all he said. He learned early in his career to never make promises that you were not absolutely sure you could deliver on. He was my friend, you know? She said, still crying. He was probably the only guy I've ever known since I was 13 who had talked to me without trying to fuck me or arrest me. She turned her head and looked down the street and wiped at her face. I just miss him. Quinn nodded. Yeah, I miss him too. Quinn left the front of the Travelers Inn and drove around aimlessly, seeing nothing but the road in front of him. The world outside the beam of his headlights did not exist. As he drove, he let his thoughts wander where they would. Everything about Scooby's death bothered him. Not only having to shoot the man, but the whole underlying issue of his sudden shift to violence and coming into possession of a fully automatic firearm. There was something that Quinn was missing, and he felt like there was an answer just at the edge of his peripheral vision. But every time he tried to look at it, the thing disappeared and he was left wondering again. The car's police radio crackled. Charlie 1 from Resolution. Quinn picked up the radio mic and depressed the transmit button. Go ahead, Resolution. As per Corporal Rafe, you were to join Charlie 2 and Charlie 3 in a licensed premise check at the Rum Runner. Quinn sighed. Copy that, Resolution. I'm en route. He hung up the radio, made a northbound turn, and headed towards the waterfront. The Rum Runner Saloon was the busiest and dirtiest bar in Resolution Cove. His history stemmed back to the Prohibition days when smugglers would house their barrels of liquor at the building that later became a saloon before transporting it down the coast into the States. The building sat on top of a rock bluff over a small bay that led into the river's inlet. After it had been turned into a warehouse, After it had been turned from a warehouse into a saloon, it became a popular watering hole for loggers and fishermen on the fringe of town. As the town grew, it eventually came to envelop the Rum Runner, and the ugly little building became surrounded by tourist-trapped restaurants and corny gift shops. It had also become a bastion for underage vacationers with fake IDs who wanted to drink, puke, and fight. Quinn was not a particular fan of the constant bar walks they had to perform, because it invariably led to the Mounties finding a drunk youth that had to be ejected, who almost always decided to try throwing a few punches and wound up in jail. It especially irked Quinn there were so many other things he could be doing, like finding out what happened to Scooby. He pulled into the bar's parking lot at the same time as Dave McLeod. Sandy Harding was already waiting in her car, hiding from the cold. I wish we didn't have to do this shit, Quinn said to Dave as they exited their cars. I really don't give a flying fuck if there are kids drinking here. It's a waste of time. You know what Green says? It's an operational priority, Dave said, punctuating the end of the statement by making quotation marks in the air with his fingers. Inspector Green was a driving force behind the bar walks, and politicking was a driving force behind Green. Months before the initiative started, the mayor had found his 17-year-old daughter on the Rum Runner's dance floor making out with a 40-year-old fisherman. She had been sloppy drunk and had promptly vomited on the mayor's shoes when he had dragged her into the parking lot. The mayor had been on a crusade against underage drinking since and had put a great deal of pressure on Green to clean up the Rum Runner. Quinn looked at the flickering neon sign and faded concert posters that adorned the front of the building and thought the only way to clean this shithole up would be burn it down. Pulling on his Kevlar gloves, Quinn looked over at Sandy and Dave. Let's get this over with. They walked through the front door of the dimly lit interior and were greeted by the familiar smells of stale beer, bad perfume, puke, and aggression. A walkway on the same plane as the entrance floor ran the perimeter of the building, with the main bar against the back wall facing the door. The center of the room, a broad dance floor, was recessed and surrounded by a railing. Most of the tables ringing the dance floor were full, and there were several people standing at the bar. The dance floor itself was unoccupied. People did not come to the Run and Rummer to dance. They came there to drink. As soon as the three Mounties walked into the establishment, several people tried very hard to look inconspicuous. A few girls, who looked to be about 16, scampered into the bathroom. Dave stepped up to the first table of patrons and started asking everyone who looked under 50 for their driver's license. Sandy barked a short laugh and went into the bathroom after the teenagers. Quinn looked around for the doorman, a hulking biker look-alike named Mike Allison, and saw him sitting on a stool beside a vacant coat check. Jesus Christ, Mike, he said as he walked over to the big man. Some of those kids don't even look old enough to drive. Didn't you even try to check for ID? This place is going to get you... Quinn stopped talking, his mouth half open, as he got closer to the bouncer. Mike Allison's face was a mass of bruises, one eye swollen shut. His nose was broken, and there was a distinct possibility he was missing several teeth. Holy fuck, Mike, Quinn said, staring at the man. What happened to you? Looks like you got hit by a cement truck. Mike Allison grunted and pushed himself off the stool, limping a little. I think I fell, he said, rubbing his jaw with a broad, tattooed hand. I can't quite remember. Don't worry about it, Sullivan. Quinn crossed his arms. Don't give me that shit, man. What the fuck happened? Your mom gave me a rough time last night. The comment was almost funny, and Quinn might have laughed if the bouncer did not look so very near to death. Come on, Mike, no bullshit. What happened to you? Mike folded his own arms and winced as he tried to stand up straight. He looked around to see if anyone was paying attention, then tilted his chin towards the front door. Quinn took his meaning and nodded. Dave and Sandy were busily harassing the teenagers about their atrocious fake driver's licenses. Quinn waved at them and pointed to the door. Dave gave him a thumbs up and went back to making fun of the youth while they begged him not to call their parents. Quinn turned and followed Mike into the parking lot, but the man did not stop there. He walked around the back of the bar to where the paved parking lot turned to gravel and weeds. As the bouncer walked, Quinn noticed a pronounced limp and heard him hissing through his teeth as he went. When they'd gone as far as they could without climbing down the rock bluff, Mike Allison turned back and scanned the parking lot. I didn't want to say nothing inside of the bar. No worries, Quinn said. Now what happened to your face? Anything I say is off the record. Got it? I don't want no charges or court or any of that cop bullshit. This is just two guys talking, right? Quinn shrugged. Sure. Whatever you want. Okay, Mike said, looked around again. I got jumped the other night when I was leaving the bar. How many guys? Quinn asked, expecting that it would have taken a small army to do so much damage to the mammoth bouncer. Just one. Quinn's eyes widened and he shook his head in disbelief. What? Mike Allison was not the toughest man he'd ever met, but he was up there. Quinn was a big man by most people's standards, and Mike made him look puny. The only bigger man Quinn knew was Charles Rafe. One of Quinn's first shifts in Resolution, he had come to a call at the Rum Runner, where a small university rugby team had gotten drunk and started a fight, tearing up the bar. When the Mounties arrived, most of the team was lying in the parking lot, bleeding, and the rest were hiding under the tables, so Mike couldn't get to them. He could not imagine one guy being able to hurt the man so badly. Are you serious? Quinn asked, still unbelieving. When did this happen? Mike rubbed at his jaw again. A couple days ago. Do you know the guy? Yeah, I know him. Mike poked his swollen eye and looked around again, checking the shadows for listeners. As Quinn watched Mike glance around him, it dawned on him that he was not only checking for people listening. His breath was quick. There was a line of perspiration across his forehead, and his movements were jerky. He was checking to make sure his attacker was not watching him talk to the police. Mike was scared. Come on, Mike, Quinn pressed. What happened? Mike sighed and looked around again. About 2 weeks ago, this twitchy little guy comes in. I've seen him in here plenty of times before, some local asshole. I think his name is Brandon or Braden or Bobby or some other bullshit yuppie name. Anyways, he comes in and sits at the bar, orders a beer and a shot. Bartender sits in front of him. He slams the shot and chugs half the beer before the bartender asks for cash. He wasn't the kind of guy you let run a tab, if you know what I mean. Mike paused and looked around again. The man's nervousness was starting to affect Quinn as well, and he felt his hand drift towards the grip of his pistol. So, Mike continued. The bartender asked for the $10 for the booze, and the guy says he hasn't got any money and keeps pounding the beer. Bartender calls me over, tells me what's what, and I grab the guy by the arm to show him the door. It wasn't a big deal. I wasn't going to hurt him, just send him on his way. He starts to yell and scream about how we're killing him and treating him like an animal and typical junkie shit. So I have to drag him to the door while he's kicking and whining and having a fucking tantrum. I just tossed him out. I didn't even tune him up or anything. I went back inside and didn't think about it again. 2 days ago, I walk up after closing, walk the girls to their cars and go to get in mine, and the guy comes out of nowhere. Now I know it was the same guy, but he ain't the same. He's got this look, like he ain't all there, like someone else, someone a lot meaner, is wearing his face. He says to me, "You can't talk to me like that." I say, "Like what?" Because I ain't even seen this little bastard in almost 2 fucking weeks and barely remember what I was talking to him about in the first fucking place. He don't say another word. He just starts screaming and runs at me. Loses it. And he ain't yelling at a guy who's mad. It's like something off the TV, like a guy in a mental hospital or one of them fucking horror movies. So he's running at me, and I reach out and grab him, because he can't be more than 100 pounds soaking wet with rocks in his pockets. But he grabs me instead and starts tossing me around like I'm fucking nothing. I'm throwing hands at the guy hard as I fucking can. And when I hit him, doesn't even feel it, just makes him madder. Quinn looked at Mike Allison's hands, which bore a striking resemblance to cinder blocks, and found that somewhat hard to believe. So he gets me down and he gets on top of me and starts wailing the piss out of me. I can't get him off. I can't get up. And I figure he's probably going to kill me. Lucky for me, one of the girls forgets her phone in the bar and comes back. As soon as the headlights hit him, he jumps up, snarls like a fucking badger, and runs off. Mike jerked his thumb towards the street. "Jesus, Mike," Quinn said. "Why didn't you phone us? The guy could have killed you." Mike looked around him again before answering. "Well, I didn't want anyone to know that I got my ass kicked like some little crackhead. That gets around and guys are going to start challenging me and I've got more problems." And he paused. "I didn't want him to know I told anyone and come back." Quinn shook his head in astonishment and worry. "Are you sure you don't want me to do something about this, Mike? If you're willing to give me a formal statement, I can put out a warrant for the guy. Once we pick him up, if he's as crazy as you say, he probably won't get out anytime soon." The bouncer waved the idea off. "No, I don't want nothing to do with it. I just want to pretend it never happened and get on with things. I ain't never been scared of no man in my whole life but this guy. Well, he scares the piss out of me. And if you'd seen him, you'd be scared too." "Mike, Quinn tried to halt the big man, but Mike just shook his head and limped past Quinn, back towards the entrance to the bar. He stopped after a few steps and looked back. "Sullivan, you see this guy, you run, or you pull that piece on your hip and put as many into him as you can. You don't want any part of this guy." Quinn didn't know what to say and simply nodded. He stood in the parking lot by himself for several minutes, looking out over the bay. He did not blame Mike for being scared. It seemed like there was a lot to be afraid of in this small town. As he stood, he turned Mike Allison's story over his mind, looking at it from different angles, searching for the burr on the story's surface that was scraping at his mind. A small, trembling drug addict, street urchin, A small, trembling, drug-addicted street urchin brutalizes a gigantic, battle-hardened, career tough guy. The idea made no sense at all. One of the things that Mike had said troubled Quinn especially, like someone a lot meaner was wearing his face. That resonated with Quinn and reminded him sharply, like an ice pick in his eye, of his confrontation with Scooby and the boy at the school. It almost seems like the madness that infected Scooby and the boy were spreading to other people in Resolution Cove, and it was spreading quickly. Quinn was still standing in the parking lot, staring out over the water, when Dave burst out of the door by the rum runner, a struggling, dirty, inebriated teenage boy in his grasp. Sandy followed closely, herding a group of nattering youth. Snapping out of his reverie, Quinn trotted over to Dave and helped him carry the kicking boy towards a police car. Quinn held him while Dave opened the back door, and together they shoved the youth in the back seat. One of the other youths stormed up to him indignantly and began jabbing his finger at Quinn. "That's police brutality, you know. You can't do that." Quinn silenced the boy's high-pitched ranting when he grabbed him by the front of his pink, pop-colored golf shirt and yanked him almost off his feet so they were nose to nose. "Go home or go to jail," Quinn said in a low, dangerous voice. "Just like your jackass friend here." The youth squeaked and tried to protest, but as he looked at Quinn's face, the complaint died as a murmur in his throat, and he nodded instead. Quinn released him, and the boy hurried across the parking lot. The other youth, also looking at Quinn somewhat fearfully, trotted to catch up, still grumbling about their rights and excessive force. "You been taking a fucking vacation?" Dave asked, his usual smile fixed to his face. "You missed out on all the fun." One of those kids had actually photocopied his older brother's driver's license, glued his own picture on it, and laminated it. I've never seen such a lame attempt at a fake ID in all my service. It was awesome. Dave stopped and looked back at Quinn's face. Sandy noticed as well. "You all right, Quinn? Look like you saw a ghost." "He looks like someone took a dump in his boots, is how he looks," Dave said. Dave said over the miserable caterwauling of the youth trapped in his car. "What's up, partner?" Despite his resolve not to, Quinn looked around to make sure no one was listening. Mike Allison's nervousness hung in the air about him like a bad smell. "Did you see Mike's face?" he asked the other Mounties. "No," Dave said. "He ducked past us when he came in and hid in the corner and didn't say anything to us. I figured we were giving him shit out here and he didn't want to press his luck." "Well," Quinn said, "he's all beat to shit." Sandy laughed. "Did that rugby team come back with a whole bunch of friends?" Dave joined in the laughter. "No," Quinn said. "It was just one guy." Dave stopped laughing when he saw the stark lack of jest on Quinn's face. "What the fuck, man?" Quinn looked around again, related the story that Mike Allison had told him. When Quinn was finished, Dave whistled softly through his teeth and Sandy ran a hand over her tightly bound hair. "What did he say the guy's name was?" Sandy asked. "Brandon or something," Quinn replied. Sandy turned to Dave. "Isn't that the name of the guy who might have murdered his mother?" Dave nodded in agreement. "Brandon Williams. That's the name Rafe was talking about yesterday." "How long did the medical examiner figure the woman had been lying in the trailer?" Quinn asked. About a week," Dave said. "Give or take a day. One of the neighbors reported last laying eyes on her about 10 days before she was found. So that would have been had to have been killed. So she would have had to have been killed after that." He studied Quinn's face. "You think it's related?" "Sorry, let me do that one again too. You think it's related?" It wasn't a question. Quinn shrugged and crossed his arms. "Well, let's have a look at it. 2 weeks ago, the guy's twitchy little crackhead breaking into cars, stealing booze at the local bar, and getting tossed around by bouncers. A week after that, he comes back and nearly kills one of the toughest bastards in town. He might have killed his mother in between." "Yeah, drug use and petty theft is one thing," Sandy said. "Attacking doormen in parking lots and killing your mother is a whole new level. I don't know if the guy has that kind of capacity. I know Brandon Williams. I've arrested him more than once. The guy is a whiny little prick, but he's never been violent. Besides, he loved his mother. She kept bailing him out of jail." "We didn't think Scooby was violent either," Quinn said. "But we all know how that turned out." Sandy nodded in concession. "Okay," Dave said. "So this hype goes nuts and kills his mother. What makes him go crazy?" Sandy, who had a background in psychology, shook her head. "It would take a traumatic event of a staggering magnitude to make someone fall that far. Or a particularly bad batch of drugs," Dave said. Quinn shook his head. "No, I don't think this was drugs. I've seen hypes lose their shit and attack people due to drug psychosis. But they don't hide afterwards. We usually get calls about them running down the street, naked and covered in someone else's blood, screaming that they're one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. They're not lucid enough to hide or try and get away. No, drugs didn't do this. Whatever did it is going around like the flu," Dave said, because these people have gone south in the last month." Quinn shoved his hands into his armpits, suddenly feeling the bite of the cold air. "Let's get out of here," he said. "I'm freezing my ass off." Dave and Sandy both nodded and started walking back to their cars. As he walked, Quinn peered at the entrance to the bar, where a seemingly an indestructible man was now cowering in a corner. That is the end of the chapter, my friends. I will try and get back a little sooner than I have before to read you Chapter 4. As always, thanks for being here. I had a good time.